Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Caliban, Dystopia, out April 22nd on Century Media Records. This album has 11 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this the band's 13th full-length studio album. They are a German metalcore band. Now at first glance this album feels very relentless. It has this brutality to it that really becomes the calling card of the record from start to finish, and it almost glazes over everything else and doesn't really allow you to understand exactly how dynamic this album actually is. But if you take the time to look at it and peel some of those layers, peel a little bit of that heaviness that's over the top, you see that there are pockets of melody, pockets of melancholy that allow this album to play itself a lot better, to be easier to digest, to be easier to comprehend. As a listener, you're able to understand exactly what the songs are trying to do on an individual basis and then have a much better appreciation for the collective. Without those pockets in this record, the album would absolutely destroy the listener. There's no way you can keep the undivided attention of a listener over 11 songs, 44 minutes if everything starts to feel exactly the same. So those pockets are really important because they create ebbs and flows throughout the construction of the record, but they're done in such a subtle way that the overall brutality of the album doesn't feel affected by it. Perfect way of building a record like this, really adding to the playability, enjoyment, and entertainment value that this record provides. As far as sound, the album feels to me like it has two different layers. On the top layer you have heaviness, you have brutality, but you have this heaviness and brutality that it's not driven just by one element. It's rather driven by a consortium of elements. You see how the drums play a role, the harsh vocals, the guitars, everything coming together, not allowing one to dictate where the other is going, but rather unifying them and allowing the overall sound to feel very robust, very together, very powerful, just big volume all around. Then underneath it you have a different layer, a much thinner layer that really spreads out the footprint of the record. Now some of the elements that create the heaviness and volume up top also create that thin layer at the bottom. Two of them come to mind, the drums and vocals. You see the harsh vocals pushing on the upper edge of that element, and then you see the clean vocals coming down at the bottom and spreading out the footprint. The same could be said for the drums. When the drums are heavy, they are heavy and they push the sound forward, but also using the cymbals to flatten out the sound at times, allowing the footprint of the record to be balanced together and to be large. This combination of these two elements and how they interact with one another is really interesting because it gives life to the album. If they were using the drums just for one, not for the other, the vocals just for one, not for the other, I think the album would feel somewhat disconnected because you could hear that there is something that is the foundation of the album, but that foundation of the album doesn't build its way through to what then becomes the actual album itself. Having the same elements play a different role but a very similar role on both ends of the spectrum really connects the sound, really makes the overall experience of the album feel fuller, more connected, more direct, once again a little bit more enjoyable and easier to digest. So I really like this soundscape in terms of how it's put together, in terms of what it offers and how dynamic it is in terms of the movement that it gives. And the drums on this album sound phenomenal. I really like the sound of the drums because they feel like they have soul. They feel like they're the heartbeat of the record. When the album needs to be a little bit more aggressive, when there is a little bit more of an anger that pushes the experience forward, the drums are there. When there's a little bit more of a moment of introspective nature, a little bit more of a melancholic stretch, the drums drop down a little bit and allow themselves to be somewhat of the pulse of that specific track or of that specific moment. So amazing job drum-wise as far as the overall record is concerned. The other pillar of this album is definitely the guitars. The guitar sound is very driven on this album. It adds melody, it adds momentum, it adds movement, it adds heaviness. It adds everything they would come to expect from a Caliban record. But the guitar sound in itself has a defining style, a defining sound that allows this album to have some grit but still feel very crisp, still feel very clean at every single turn. I really enjoy the guitar sound from that perspective because at one hand it feels edgy, it feels organic, and on the other hand it feels very clean, very controlled, and very precise. Now as far as the vocals are concerned, I feel like they maximize the value of having harsh and clean and allowing the spectrum to really push wide and making the overall experience of this album as dynamic vocally as it is sound-wise. This is an album that vocally really becomes a little bit of a roller coaster ride. Even songs that are perhaps a little bit more controlled in terms of what the sound is doing, the vocals are really stretching out the parameters of the track and how you feel towards that track. But outstanding vocal performance, matching the intensity of the tracks and really helping bringing a lot of the lyrics to life. You feel the emotion in the voice, you feel the emotion in the tone, and you definitely feel the emotion in the delivery. This is a very consistent sounding record from start to finish. Consistent in terms of the quality that it provides, not in terms of the experience. I feel like this album offers the spectrums of Caliban. You get the heavier side of the band, and you get the most melodic and melancholic side of the band, and then you get everything in between. And I feel like they work mostly in the in-between, emphasizing the heavier side as the flag that they're going to carry across all 11 songs. In a nutshell, that is the experience of listening to this album. And because of that, the album itself becomes memorable. You don't just feel connected with the songs, you feel connected with the overall experience that the album gives you. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Phantom Pain. Very driven, more direct sound-wise, allowing the experience to feel almost groovier. It's a song that doesn't really feel heavy per se, it feels groovier. But it has some heaviness, and that heaviness starts to creep in as the track progresses. So it's a song that morphs as it moves along. The vocals help push the intensity up, and they help bring the melancholy down. Depending on where you are in the track, the vocals really paint you a picture of exactly what the emotions are that are driving this song, having a perfect dual role throughout the entire track. A song that musically gains momentum, musically gains force, musically gains strength, if you will, but it's super dynamic vocally, and that makes the track very interesting and allows the song to perhaps be maybe one-dimensional musically, but not necessarily allowing you to feel that way towards how the whole package comes together. Next we have Darkness I Become, a heavier track from the start. This one is brutal, heavy, with great movement from the get-go, using the heaviness to increase the movement of the track. It's not like the track slows down because it's heavy. It actually feels faster because of the heaviness that it has. It dips in the chorus. The chorus is a lot more melodic, a lot more melancholic. You see that in the music, you see that in the vocal approach, allowing the track to have this sort of a wave, this sort of movement. But that creates so much energy because you are on a boat at sea getting rocked by the waves. You are on a roller coaster ride. This track is a heavy roller coaster ride from start to finish, with those deep melancholic moments to really bring your attention all the way down. Last but not least, we have one of my favorite tracks on the album, Hibernate. This is a metalcore ballad. When you look at your traditional metal ballad, the way they're constructed, the way they're put together, the way the sound progresses in those songs, this track has all of those elements in spades, but it has a metalcore backdrop to it. I love the experience that this song gives. I love the sound. I love how emotional it feels. It's a real emotionally connected song. You connect with it emotionally on a lyrical point of view. You connect with it on an emotional musical point of view. It's an incredible track in terms of how it sounds, how it feels. I would like perhaps to have this song more in the middle of the pack, not as much down in the track ordering list, but it really shocked me and surprised me to being in that spot. And maybe having it there creates a different feel towards it and allows the song to have a much larger impact than if it was in the middle of the pack. But either way, I honestly don't think it really matters too much where you put it, because the track all around is one of the best standout songs on this record. This is it, Caliban, Dystopia, out April 22nd on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.